So, gone for a slightly more moody shot with the sun behind me in a silhouette-y sort of sexy way, because I think it's pretty sexy talking about the history of cloud computing. The history of cloud computing's much debated. So this is my version of events. When I started in industry, I was working on big mainframes that you could carve up and share across multiple people. And some people argue that the cloud started back then. But in reality, I think the cloud probably started in earnest, or certainly in its current form, in probably around about mid-2000s. And what happened was, and it's a bit urban legend, but bear with me. The virtualization platforms became a lot more prominent. People were able to carve up their own IT into lots of different sub-virtual capacity models. All got quite interesting. And Amazon, the retailer, born in the internet, had loads of capacity, became very, very successful. And the only way they could service that success is by buying lots and lots and lots of computers. So they ended up with a massive data center with loads of computers in it that were only really there for when peak trading hit. So they had loads of capacity. They were in this great place where they were making loads of money, but they really wanted to get more investment return on their IT investments. So they created a platform called Amazon Web Services, and the whole point of it was to try and share some of their IT infrastructure across other people who wanted to pay for it. So they, when people weren't buying books because it was overnight in the US, they had loads of IT capacity sat in their data center. They would sell it to anyone who wanted to buy it. And that was the birth of the cloud. So Amazon Web Services, I think around about 2007, don't quote me on that, started selling AWS services, which were infrastructure as a service, and they were basically reselling their compute capacity to other people who wanted to buy it. And pretty soon people realized that's actually quite a bright idea. There is a lot of benefit in just paying for a little bit of compute if you need it overnight, especially if someone's selling to you really cheap. So the industry was born. And AWS have gone from strength to strength. We'll talk a bit about market share later, but the fundamentals are that they are the biggest infrastructure as a service provider on the planet. They have had a 5 or 6 year head start on most of the other companies. And so in that context, they came up with a great idea and have executed perfectly. Then things started getting a bit more interesting. And as is always the case with technology, people find new ways of doing things. So Amazon realized, because they needed to maintain competitive advantage, you can't just sell bits of your computer. So they started bundling other services such as databases and other sort of technologies with those services. They spun AWS off as effectively a separate business unit, so it's got its own P&L, its own chief exec, and they started trying to find ways of making the best use of the competitive advantage they had. Other entrants started joining, so Microsoft created what is now known as Azure, and that is very similar to the IaaS platform that AWS provide. So Microsoft Azure, very similar to the AWS services at the outset. Google, who also have lots of computers sat in data centers, created their own, known as the Google Cloud Platform, or GCP. And so they are the three main providers now. They are the ones that got on the bandwagon early. And a lot of the services like Netflix and Facebook and trying to work out where I am. I am in the wrong place. Sorry about that. I cocked up my navigation. Don't get that on camera. Well, you can keep it on camera if you want. People will laugh at me. But AWS and Azure and GCP, are the market leaders for good reason, but they are effectively now selling their infrastructure services to some of the SaaS providers we mentioned. So Netflix, they sit on those core cloud platforms. So that's sort of the history of cloud looking back. Where it is today is everyone's now competing for a combination of price, so it's very commoditized at the infrastructure layer, but also different functionality. So AWS and Azure and GCP have got data centers in different regions, so they're geographically covering pretty much the whole world now. They offer different levels of service based on resilience, so you can have a server that's in America backed up to one that's in the UK, and that will provide you a resilient service in case there's major failure in one data center or another. All these sorts of things, they've solved lots of problems to make sure that cloud computing gives good benefit over buying a piece of hardware. The other thing that's happening is that there is more functionality being developed around bits of software and bits of different structures around the technology. So in some cases there are things that are called containers. Now, I'm not going to get into too much depth on these ones, but these allow you to effectively create a container within a virtual server on the physical server. But all that stuff just adds more flexibility and more cleverness to cloud computing. And if your IT department are looking to buy containers or some of those more complex things, definitely worth talking to them about it, not me. But fundamentally, that's the history and where it's going. And today, there are so many different options. I think Azure has got something in the region of 200 different product lines, and they're not products, product lines. So product categories. So you've got AI, you've got machine learning, you've got compute, you've got networking, you've got all sorts of things that really, need a lot of focus. We're just coming into Bembridge Harbour, and I'm always a bit nervous about Bembridge Harbour because it's very shallow. Bembridge Marina, sorry. But I think I'm doing all right at the moment because we've got about 3 meters of water, so I'm going to carry on talking. Where is it going in the future? Well, I think where it's going in the future is it's just going to continue to evolve. There will be more clever technology that is wrapped up as a cloud computing service. And where I think the major providers are going to go is anything that's really expensive. They'll buy one and they'll carve it up and sell it to multiple people. So, building on what used to be really expensive hardware, things like quantum computing, which we'll talk about in another video because that's a whole video in its own right. Things like more complex high security stuff, all those things are probably something that need, will be where the cloud platform is evolving. Because where cloud really comes into its own is if it's too expensive to buy and own yourself, you could buy it as a cloud platform and you can share it across multiple customers, and that is a sensible way of evolving things. I think the other thing that might start getting quite interesting is artificial intelligence and how that plays into cloud computing. If you think at the moment you buy a piece of software and that's in the cloud, software as a service, as we mentioned before, AI will allow you to effectively make decisions and do things as a service. So you could build an AI platform that basically decides what it's going to do over a period of time. And the AI platform, effectively, you could buy business processes as a service in the cloud using AI to deliver that business process. So it's got a long way to go, cloud, but fundamentally, historically, it's been around since about the early 2000s, and it's going to be here to stay.